All right, greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. This is an hour later than we usually go, and it is so much darker. I apologize for the lighting. I'm trying to figure that out. Graham's recording from his phone because he forgot to charge his computer. So we are just a crack operation as always. Graham, what'd you think of the big day yesterday? Kansas, Virginia Tech, they really served you well, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story of the day was big results across the board, and I'm excited to talk about it because I really do think that was probably the single most impactful Saturday we've had of the entire season. Just so many big results across the board that really moved teams, and some teams, just by doing pretty much nothing, benefited a lot.
Yeah, I think more so than anything, it was that teams around the bubble failed. I tweeted about that like midway through the day that everybody in the like 29 to 46 range on my seed list was losing, or I think the only win at the time was Miami beating NC State. And then Texas beat Missouri and St. Mary's beat Pacific, and that was it. Like everybody else lost or didn't play. So let's start there with firing up the spreadsheet. We'll do these five brutal losses. Most of the teams in that 29 to 46 range, didn't, right? It was Clemson losing to Duke. It was stuff like that. But these are the ones these teams lost to teams not projected to dance outside of that one at the bottom, which is now a team projected to dance. But let's start with Georgia, who right now is smack dab on the bubble. If you ask me, I think if you ask just about anybody, I just barely got them in this morning. I was originally going to have Missouri as my last team in and Georgia as my first team out. And then I realized that Georgia beat Missouri on the road. And I was like, wow, I better scrub that. And I ended up with Georgia as my last team in. Second Saturday in a row that Oklahoma really screwed up bracketologists because they beat Vanderbilt in Nashville last weekend. Now they get this win over Georgia. Graham, obviously, you also have Georgia down in your last few teams in spot. How are you feeling on the dogs in general right now? I think they're staying in for now, but they're going to fall out because they've lost 7 of 11 and they have a tough slate ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty much how I feel about them. I think that they really are the definition of a true bubble team because one or two results is going to send them one way or the other. I think it really is going to be a close call on whether they actually make it or not. But as you said, I just think the way they're playing isn't really tournament caliber at this time, and they do have a really nice quad one, quad two record. But when you kind of peel back the onion there, it's not a great overall performance. It's more so just a catchy, in good looking Q1/2 record. So between the bad loss that they took in Q3 and having really not that many victories that kind of stand out, like you mentioned, Missouri, it's one of the best ones they have this year. When you look at the overall performance from Georgia, I do think they're probably going to fall out, but it's close. I mean, I think the SEC in general, we talked about it on Friday. There's just a few teams that are right there, and you just wonder, where's it going to stop? Is it going to be two or three of them get in, or is it going to be two or three of them get left out? You just don't quite know where that bubble's gonna stop at the end of the day.
Yeah. So no quad 1A wins. They got swept by Florida, got blown out in both of those games. They lost at Texas, got blown out in that game. So those were their three Q1A chances. To your point, they're 8-7 against quads 1 and 2. That looks good. But then you factor in quad 3 and they're 8-8 against the top three quads. And that's pretty rough. I can't use it to throw them out though, because I have Texas as a 10 seed and they are 8-9 against quads 1 through 3. But Texas also has some, really solid wins on its profile. Georgia does not. Yeah, I think they'll ultimately fall out, but they stay in for now. UCF, I don't know why this one is italicized. That must have been a 69 earlier in the week. UCF loses at home to West Virginia. I think more so than it dropping UCF to the bubble, which I don't think it did. It could have if other teams around the bubble had won, but I feel like both UCF and Iowa, we wanted to drop them, but couldn't justify it because they didn't suffer as bad losses as other teams behind them. But I think more so than what it did to UCF, it brings West Virginia back into the conversation. I was surprised to find them as my fifth team out, but there's also nobody else to consider at that point. Like it's either them or California for me, and I think Cal is pretty close to dead at this point, at least at the moment. They could play their way in by winning out, but um, UCF, what are we feeling about them though moving forward? Because I texted you, said I hope you didn't lock UCF yet, and you said you've been keeping them in your don't blow it territory for a reason because you were worried that they might.
Yeah, I think UCF has all the telltale signs of a team that could blow it. On the other hand, really, really, really bad performance by the bubble yesterday. So I don't think they're in that much danger
No.
simply because there's not really teams to pass them at this point. Now, that could change if all of a sudden this week we're seeing, maybe Virginia Tech goes to Miami and they pick up a road win. Like you start to see those kind of results, maybe potentially UCF could be in danger. But more than anything, I mean, with the wins above bubble rating that they already have, they would have to really truly tank from here on out, and I don't see it. So I agree with you. I think it's a bigger result for West Virginia playing themselves into contention than UCF potentially falling out.
To UCF's credit, they have a home win over Kansas, home win over Texas Tech, a road win over Texas A&M. I mean, that's three good wins, but that's all they've done against the field. But this was their first loss outside of Quad One, which explains why their wins above bubble is so strong. They're still around 30th in the average of resume metrics. So, yeah, I think they would need to continue shooting themselves in the foot with more quad two, maybe even some quad three losses to drop out. West Virginia now has this road win over UCF, also a home win over Kansas, but also not much else. And they do have three quad two losses. So I think they have their work cut out for them. Although, if you just look at the net, UCF is only 5 spots ahead of West Virginia, but that's why we don't just look at the net. Virginia Tech takes a terrible home loss to Florida State. Not only a terrible resume loss, it was ugly. What did the Seminoles end up shooting? You texted me when they were like 8 for 16 from 3 point range.
I don't know what the final result was, but Virginia Tech was actually leading at half and ended up getting blown out in this game. But a big part of it was the Seminoles or the entered the game as the 316th shooting 3-point team in the country, and they were shooting lights out from 3 points. So I mean, this is kind of the way it goes in college basketball, right? The Hokies didn't play great, but sometimes your opponent's just playing better. And I think some days you just catch a team that's playing really hot. Florida State, had they not screwed it up so bad early in the year, they're actually playing pretty decent basketball right
Yeah.
now. You kind of wonder if maybe they would have had a shot at the tournament. Frankly, if they played this way the whole season, maybe a pretty decent seed. But for Florida State, unfortunately, they had too much work to do. I was surprised Virginia Tech wasn't further out of the field after this loss,
Yeah.
but the bubble just really was awful yesterday.
It is fun, and this goes back to our whole wins above bubble conversation from last week of it doesn't matter in what order you get the wins, right? It like the math works out where if you win this one and lose this one, or vice versa, it's the same wob. And heading into the week, this is right where Virginia Tech was for me. I may have had them like last team in, first team out, somewhere in that vicinity. And if they had beaten Florida State at home and lost at Clemson, this is about where they would still be. So it is funny how it does come out in the wash, even though I mean, it doesn't feel like they did take a terrible loss, but also got a great win. So maybe the week ends up being a net positive for them in the end because now they have another win they can hang their hat on. But for now, yeah, they're still barely out. And I was going to make the same point about Florida State. They've won, I think, 5 out of 7. They beat Miami. They kind of killed both Cal and Stanford. Um, I feel like there's an ACC team that does this every year. I feel like it's usually Georgia Tech though, for some reason, but they'll like start out 7 and 13, and then all of a sudden, like they can't stop pulling off upsets against the bubble. So the Noles are doing some damage. They get who do they have the rest of the way? Oh, they still have home games against Miami and SMU. So they could hand out a couple more bubble daggers before all is said and done. Speaking of SMU, wow, what an accidental segue. The Mustangs lose at Syracuse. Not a terrible looking resume loss. That's a quad one result, but that's a game that a bubble team should win. And now the Mustangs are getting kind of suspect in a hurry. I tweeted about this yesterday. I don't think North Carolina is going to lose enough down the stretch that they can fall really onto the bubble, but I think they can lose enough down the stretch that they really hurt teams like SMU, who their best win was a home game against North Carolina. You ended up with SMU at 39. I have them at 40. Either way, that's a 10 seed, not particularly convincingly in the field. I mean, without looking at their remaining schedule, what do you feel like they need to do the rest of the way?
Me and 500 basketball down the stretch is probably going to put them right on that bubble. A winning record in the regular season is probably enough to put them into the field. Looking at their wins above bubble, it's a little bit over one, so they still have a little bit of wiggle room there. So that's why I think like even 500 play is probably going to be enough to get them in, but certainly a winning record, I think would be enough to get in. So not a particularly convincing year for SMU. I keep thinking about what if that half court shot goes differently
Yeah.
in Texas? That maybe truly changed the postseason fate for both SMU and Virginia Tech. And SMU almost hit another one last night against Syracuse. They almost had two big heaves to win games. And if that's the case, like SMU wins that game, they're sitting pretty. They just pick up another quad one road win. Like all of a sudden, SMU is safely in the field. Amazing how close SMU came to really changing their fortunes on not one, but two half court daggers.
So they are still top 40 in all of the metrics, highest of 32 in KPI. So this, 9, 10 seed range is what, all the data is pointing towards. Now, St. Mary's is in the same boat, and I don't have them, quite this high on my seed list. So it's not always about the metrics, but 0-4 against Quad 1A, lost at home to Virginia and NC State as well. So they've had all of the opportunities, and now they have, suspect losses to Syracuse and LSU. Uh, I think I do. I need to look at their schedule. They have home games against Louisville and Miami and Boston College. We can go ahead and call that a win. Road games against Cal and Stanford, which, I mean, it's a tough trip, even for SMU, and a road game against Florida State. So I don't even know if 3-3 is enough because really they should win all of those games. Maybe not the home game against Louisville, but everything else a bubble team should win. But they're all, aside from the home game against Boston College, losable games as well. So I think it could be a photo finish for SMU, fittingly a horse race. And then Oklahoma State TCU, which was a bubble bonanza, kind of a whichever team won was probably going to be in, whichever team lost was going to be out. I think Oklahoma State is like way out at this point, though. I was surprised at how far I went into my, first five out and still wasn't even considering them. That really developed in a hurry, but same goes for TCU getting back into the mix now. We coincidentally both have them at 41. What do you think the Horned Frogs? I mean, I tweet about these yesterday. I think if they go 4-2 down the stretch, it's going to be a very, very tough call. And then a lot of people pushed back and said they would be convincingly in, and I didn't feel like arguing because why bother? But what do you think with the Horned Frogs, who have road games against UCF and Texas Tech, home games against West Virginia, Arizona State, and Cincinnati, and then a road game against Kansas State? I feel like if they win the four they're supposed to win, they're probably heading to Dayton.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know where the bubble's gonna land, right? A
Yeah,
couple of years
sure.
ago, all of a sudden it came in, the playing games are on 10 seed line. You just don't know where that line's going to be drawn. I do think TCU is probably okay if they go 4-2 down the stretch because more than anything, TCU just needs wins because they've already got some really quality wins and a couple out of conference against Florida and Wisconsin have been looking a lot better recently. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I think, and even if it gets into discussion, you could also mention they had Michigan in real trouble. Didn't get Michigan, but those bubble teams, they get a lot of discussion in the committee room. They spend a lot of time looking into every little detail that could come up. I think TCU is ultimately going to make the field. I think Oklahoma State's going to miss the field. I actually thought the game was more important yesterday to Oklahoma State than
Yeah.
TCU because I just didn't really see a path forward for Oklahoma State if they lost, whereas I thought TCU might be able to absorb a loss and still come in strong down the stretch and make the field. I think TCU will probably end up in. I think Oklahoma State will probably end up out.
I would concur with that. Now, the five biggest results of the weekend, and these aren't necessarily in order, but I put the Wisconsin Michigan State game first because it was Friday night. Badgers are just flying up the seed list. I had them at like 38 overall a week ago. Now they're up to 24 for me. I think I may have been a little aggressive with that, but maybe you're more in line with 27. But whether they're a six seed or a seven seed, they are, if not a lock, all but a lock. Probably 2-4 down the stretch against their remaining schedule gets them in. But boy, I would not want to face the Badgers right now. They are terrifying. They feel a lot like that Villanova team from 2018, where it just feels like they're going to hit a dozen threes every single night. Um, Anything you want to talk about on this game? Maybe how it affects Michigan State seed, who we both ended up with as our 16th overall.
Yeah, I think Michigan State is only 16th overall for me because I couldn't find anyone to put above them. If it was any other way, I'd be putting them as a five seed. I just think you have to win on the road at some point against somebody with a pulse. Let me think about this. Off the top of my head, I believe Michigan State's best wins on the road are Washington, Oregon, Penn State, and Rutgers. Don't quote me on that, but I think those might actually be their only four road wins at all.
You are
So
correct.
I'm not entirely sure that's right, but I think those are the only four road wins Michigan State has this season. So I really don't like the Spartans' resume. I think they are more of a five seed that just happens to be hanging on to a four at this moment. Wisconsin, on the other hand, playing absolutely great. I think it's bonkers that you compare them to the 2018 Villanova team, who is
Right
just
now,
running
right
wild in the
now.
NBA right now. But they can do some pretty good work. Badgers really improving their seed. One thing that could help Wisconsin a little bit. I got stuck on BYU at 24th overall because of who BYU beat in non-conference play. With Richie Saunders information coming out about him no longer
Yeah.
being able to play the rest of the year, I think BYU is going to move down. And I think that kind of opens up a spot, not just from a team moving out of the way, but also now you don't have that head-to-head issue potentially lingering for Wisconsin.
Yeah. I don't think they're 2018 Villanova good. I don't think they have anywhere near the floor that that team had. Like Villanova could beat you in many ways, but Wisconsin can just destroy you with threes the way that Villanova team could. But they are, man, they've picked up three probably the best trio of wins that any team in the country has, possibly. Maybe no, Texas Tech. What am I talking about? But Wisconsin's up there. But Michigan State, like you keep harping on their lack of road wins. They do have at least neutral wins over North Carolina and Kentucky. Like they didn't just only win at the Breslin Center, but I get your point. I also did not want them at 16. I just couldn't really come up with anybody else to put there. But speaking of Texas Tech, man, I'm killing the segues today. I've been practicing. Texas Tech wins at Arizona. The Wildcats' second consecutive loss in kind of heartbreaking fashion. They dropped to 3 overall for both of us. Texas Tech, we'll get into them a little bit more. We're going to discuss the current very crowded case of the 2 and 3 seed lines after we go through these five biggest results. But what's your biggest takeaway from this one?
I just thought it was a well played basketball game. Like more than anything, seating wise, I just thought both teams looked really good. And I think that could matter in the committee room when you're talking about these teams. Just Texas Tech looks elite. Arizona looked elite, even though they didn't have Goa Pete for half the game. Like I just genuinely thought both of these teams looked like teams that could win a national championship. So that's what I think makes the Big 12 a little bit special compared to some of these other leagues is I look at the top teams there, and I don't think just could they win a an Elite Eight game. I think if they get there, they could win the whole thing. And I think you're talking about five different teams in the Big 12 that I could legitimately see winning a national championship, and it wouldn't surprise me. So for Texas Tech, obviously a huge road win to go to Arizona pick up that victory. Arizona hurts a little bit but I don't think it's the whole season, right? Arizona has a really great resume. I'll be surprised if Arizona falls off the one line. If they do, I think more than anything, it's going to be because UConn keeps winning and Houston beats them out for the
Yep.
Big 12 championship.
Yep.
If Arizona wins either a Big 12 tournament title or a Big 12 regular season championship, I think they're a one seed.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. And I definitely agree with your point on the top of the Big 12. Like I keep getting asked that on radio hits. I do a spot every week within like Penn State country. So they always want to talk Big Ten. They're like, would you take the Big Ten or the Big 12 to win it all? I was like, well, it's been 25 years since the Big Ten's won it all. And also, I think the Big 12's top five is better than the Big Ten's top five. So give me the Big 12. Stop asking me this question. uh, two other of these Big 12 teams, Iowa State and Kansas, would again, we'll touch on both of them in the 2-3 seed conversation. But if you want to talk about who looked like a title contender and who didn't, Iowa State did yesterday. Kansas, not so much, even with Darren Peterson, which is just becoming a thing, even more so. Would Kansas be better off without Darren Peterson? Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I figured this was gonna really truly figured this was gonna happen. Kansas put it on them in Lawrence. Payback's well, it's something. So I figured this one was kind of overdue. Really, if you like, I think with this Big 12, as tough as it is, you're just gonna have to get used to the idea of like Arizona, you might lose a couple games.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean Arizona's not an excellent basketball team. You might lose a couple games. You might get pounded by Iowa State and Ames. Doesn't mean you're a bad basketball team. You can be a really good basketball team and lose in Ames. Like that was again, this is my big takeaway for the Big 12 is I just see teams that can win a national championship. So big win for Iowa State. Not really that bad of a loss. The margin's bad for Kansas, but they just split on the season series. Both teams won by 18 on their home floor. Like no advantage either way on that one. So um, big win for Iowa State mainly because now they can set up not only a potential path to a two seed, but they get Houston. If Iowa State has three losses and they win that game, I think Houston, or excuse me, Iowa State might be headed for a one line down the road.
Yeah. I mean, they if they win out, they could be one overall for crying out loud. I mean, they would probably need some help from Michigan or Duke, but with their remaining schedule, I mean, they were no longer for a long time. I've been lower on Iowa State than you. I still am a little bit lower on them, two spots lower. But for the longest time, to me, it was like, all right, yeah, you got that great road win over Purdue, but I'm not seeing it lately. You took some bad losses to Cincinnati and TCU. I don't feel like a two seed type team to me, but now they're instantly kind of undeniable in that regard, and they have enough games left that they could absolutely climb to a one seed. And then two more games here, big time bubble matchups. Although NC State's not really on the bubble, and Miami's not really anymore. A week ago they were my second to last team in. Now we both have them at 30 overall, so pretty solidly on the 8 line. Hurricanes got that home win over North Carolina, in which they broke Caleb Wilson in the process, and now this road win over NC State. And I didn't even realize we both ended up exactly with Miami one spot ahead of NC State. Probably not a lot to talk on that then, since we both agree with where they should be. But I think they're both solidly in the field. As you tweeted this morning, like NC State is right where that kind of cut line is. Like everything below 31 still feels a little susceptible to get left out if they were to crash and burn. But these teams, they would really have to play their way out to blow it at this point. But Texas and Missouri, more so in actual bubble battle. I think if Missouri wins that, they're looking at like Missouri 42, Texas 43, maybe even Texas falls out. I don't know. But now Texas is somewhat safely in the field as a 10 seed, and Missouri is my first team out. Your second to last team in. What are you thinking on the Tigers ultimately, who are projected to lose all six of their remaining games?
I thought Missouri was very likely to drop out of the field if they lost this game, and then Saturday happened, so they really didn't move for me where I was expecting them to. On the other hand, I do think this is the exact victory Texas needed to really kind of not cement themselves in the field, but make it so they have to really screw up. And I do think they have to screw up at this point. They just have so many quality wins. Feeling really good about the Longhorns' chances. Missouri, I think, is going to be a close call because they also have a bunch of quality wins too. I just don't think they're going to win enough. So it'll be
Yeah.
close. I think Missouri's going to be right there, but I tend to think this is the game that determined who gets in, who gets out, and it just happened about a month before Selection Sunday.
Yeah. Missouri has the quality wins to be in the conversation for sure, but yeah, I think they're just going to end up with way too many losses. And yeah, I agree with you. Like it doesn't lock Texas into the field, but it does like cement them into the conversation. Like there's no longer an argument for leaving Texas out at this point in time. I don't think so. That I think that's pretty big for them. All right, and now on to the 2-3 seed line conversation, which is just pretty impossible to sort out. I mean, we both have Houston at the 5 overall, so the top 2 seed, and then we both have Florida and Texas Tech kind of bringing up the rear of this bunch. I think even though if you made me pick my final four today without seeing the bracket, like I would absolutely consider Florida, but I don't think their resume. Yeah, I just keep keeping them at 11. Like I keep finding a reason to not promote them above that because they just don't have those marquee wins. They didn't do a whole lot out of conference, and the SEC just isn't that good this year, even though it probably is going to get 10 teams in. But which of these 8 teams would you like to start with, Graham? Because this was your idea to debate the 2-3 seed lines.
Well, I mean, I think I'd like to talk about Houston really quickly just to say they seem like a clear five overall, right? Like the question for Houston right now is can they survive trips to Ames and Lawrence? Because if they lose both of those, okay, maybe they're not a 2 seed. But if they pick up a win in even one of those, they're at least a 2 seed, but potentially even getting onto the one line. So I think Houston a very clear five overall. Where it gets tricky is when you get down to Purdue and Iowa State. How important is that road win for Iowa State? For me, the fact that it was by 23 points is a game changer, not just for that game, but for their both teams' resumes long term, because they are coming into direct comparison with each other. So for me, I think that's enough to get Iowa State to 6 overall and put Purdue back at 7 overall. But I think if you were to not have that result kind of sticking there, Purdue seems like a very easy call for the 2 line to me.
I think if I had them next to each other, I probably would have just made that switch, but I ended up still having Kansas ahead of Iowa State. I think they just have, I think both Purdue and Kansas being 5-4 against quad 1A, and they're like really good quad 1A wins for the most part. That vaults them ahead of Iowa State for me, who, I mean, obviously that win yesterday was huge, but they just don't have the stockpile of wins against the top of the Graham's elite wins, if you will, that I want to see from a 2 seed. So I was tempted to still have Iowa State behind Illinois as well. But again, I've been I've been lower on Iowa State than you all season long. We're not going to suss out that argument right now. I do think if they were to win 2 of these 3, obviously that game at BYU just got easier with Richie Saunders out, and BYU keeps losing to all of the top 5 teams in the Big 12. But if they win 2 out of those 3, that'll probably be enough for me to be back in on them as even a potential 1 seed. But yeah, for me, it's just the sheer volume of quad 1A wins. It was ultimately the home loss to Wisconsin that made me decide to keep Illinois off of the 2 line. Um, we have come full circle though on Nebraska. Now I'm lower than you on Nebraska. What happened here? You've got them as your last 2 seed.
Well, had Nebraska's my last 2 seed until Illinois beat well, they beat Indiana pretty good today. So with that, I'm moving Illinois up to 8 overall. Not because it was a home win over Indiana, but because it was so convincing and it was a quality win and they were already really tightly packed together. So I do have Illinois now 8, Nebraska 9, Kansas 10. But I think that's an indication, right? Like a home win over Indiana this late in the year shouldn't move teams that much, but that's how tight together these teams
Yeah.
really are. Like that's how much of a debate it is that you can make those kinds of moves for that. I do think Illinois just has really terrific wins, winning at Purdue, at Nebraska. Those really stand out. And I think if you combine those two really, really good road wins with an efficiency metric profile that makes a lot of sense, that's when I think Illinois really kind of completes the picture because maybe they don't have the depth of wins that some of the other teams here have, but I think the two really terrific road wins backs up the efficiency profile.
Now, here's the fun part of all this because we could argue these teams for a long time. We probably will talk about them quite a bit if we figure out how to do the technology for the mock committee in a couple of days. But look at all of these games remaining, man. I mean, outside of Nebraska, who doesn't really have a whole lot, and even those are all quad one games. I think at Iowa's probably quad 1A still, wherever Iowa is in the net. I don't know, but boy, Illinois still has to play Michigan. Purdue plays Michigan, Michigan State, even though at Ohio State's probably quad 1A. All three of these are certainly quad 1A. So all of these teams' resumes are going to change considerably in the next couple of weeks. But for now, it is a mess. I agree with you. Houston is the clear five overall. There is a very clear line in the sand between the top four teams and Houston, but that could change tomorrow if Houston wins at Iowa State. I think they certainly vault ahead of Connecticut for me if they get that marquee win, but maybe even straight ahead of Arizona as well. I don't know. I'll have to look at it, but I'll probably wait until that Houston Arizona game on Saturday. Anything else you want to say on these eight teams or on the weekend in general before we wrap up? Wrap up?
Well, I think Florida might be arguably as good or better than any team on this list, but look at those wins at Vanderbilt, terrific, versus Alabama, versus Tennessee, versus Kentucky. First off, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky aren't as good as a lot of the teams that were beaten by some of the other teams here, and they were all at home. I just think Florida does not have the profile. I've seen a lot of the bracketologists out there think Florida's a two seed. I just don't see it right now. And it's not because I don't think the team's good enough. I just don't think they have the resume compared to these other teams. So for me, Florida back end three seed, just like you. And I don't think that's really controversial to me because the
Yeah.
resume does not stack up.
Yeah. I mean, you can absolutely, I already said, if you made me pick my Final Four right now, I'm maybe putting Florida in there because they are top five in all of the predictive metrics. They're also 13th or worse in all of the resume metrics. And that's more so what seeding is based on. I mean, if you're following a bracketologist who's seeding based on Ken Palm ranking, do better because that's not what's going to matter in the end. Vinny is really hammering the importance of wins above bubble. I think we'll see that in a big way when the mock or when the top 16 reveal happens on Saturday. But maybe they'll surprise us, and then we'll spend the next 3 weeks like trying to figure out how the hell we're going to do this the rest of the way. But I think that'll wrap us up for today. As you see there, massive game tomorrow between Houston and Iowa State. Less massive game between Duke and Syracuse. Nothing else happening today. So enjoy the downtime until that big game tomorrow night. Take care.